Okay, my name is John Koerner. I have the nickname Spider that I've used as a performer. I turned 80 years old 3 months ago, and I'm sitting here in Palmer's, which I do every morning. And
it's December 10th, and I'm Rob Hahn, the person asking the questions.
okay,
So tell me, what first brought you to Dinkytown, and what are some of your earliest memories, impressions?
okay. Back in 1958, when I started not being a normal person anymore, I mistakenly enlisted in the Marine Corps, which only lasted not very long. But in any case, while I was there on a Liberty up in L.A., I was out in the West Coast part of that of the Marine Corps, but I'd read a magazine, I think it was a Playboy magazine. They had an article about coffee houses, which is something I hadn't heard of, and I went to visit a couple of those in L.A. So I started to understand what that was all about, and I had no idea that there was such a thing here. But when I came in, I think July of '59, no, 59, I came back, and of course I knew people here, but it turned out we had our own version of it. The main focal point was the coffee house at 10 o'clock Scholar in Dinkytown. And there was a whole little scene developing, and some of it was musicians, you know, and people would sit in the Scholar and talk about different stuff and play chess and maybe read poetry or speak poetry. It was the usual kind of coffee house scene. And so that became a focal point for me at that time.
Do you remember the first time you performed there and what it was like?
No.
Let me just get a focus real quick.
Yep.
Reset the focus. Okay, go ahead.
From a musical standpoint,
Yeah.
what made the Scholar so unique and so special?
Well, the thing that made it different, I would say, is just the fact that it was in Minnesota. You know, we weren't the East Coast and we weren't the West Coast, and we weren't ashamed of that. And so it was just a lot of local folks that had caught the bug of that kind of thing. And I don't know, I couldn't say we had a style exactly. Everybody did their own, you know. Of course, one thing was the fact that Dylan was there at the time, and he, at that time, he was just one of the bunch. We were all a little goofy in our own personal ways, you know, and he was one of them. Although I can say that you could hear that he had a special edge on the talent that the rest of us didn't quite have.
What sort of edge, or how did it manifest itself?
Well, I remember I can't remember the song, but I remember him making up a song, and it just seemed different. It was cleaner, and it was more to the point, and you could, in retrospect, it's not hard to notice that that was the beginning part of where he was going.
Did you and Dylan talk much about his decision to head out east?
No.
Okay.
He just kind of disappeared.
You said you were all, I think you once referred to it as you were drinkers and thinkers and
Yeah.
interesting cats, and was he, we have this, I think a lot of people have this idea of him today as kind of this eccentric, somewhat reclusive, but back in the day of Dinkytown, what was he like? Did he stand out outside of his musical talents any different than anyone else?
Well, yeah, there were people that didn't like him very much. you know, he had kind of a, I don't know if arrogance is the right word or not, probably not exactly, but you get the idea. He was kind of different, and he was involved in those kind of things that people do then, you know. There was women that he liked, and I think he was some point involved with the Sammy fraternity over there. There's stories about him. I mean, I have no idea as to the veracity, but something about him stealing a bunch of steaks out of their freezer, you know. And I think I was married for a while back then, and I think he stayed with us for a short period of time too. He was, you know, he was kind of on his own, and he stayed in. I think he was living over the Gray's drugstore for a while, which was there, and it's hard to remember a lot of specifics, but yeah.
And I think he mentioned you specifically in his book Chronicles.
Yeah.
Was that kind of cool?
Yeah. Well, it was surprising. You know, he treated me very nicely in that, and there were times where we got together and worked on some music together, and we played some jobs together as well. There was a place over on Snelling called the Purple Onion that we both played. It was another place that was starting to do folk music.
What about the development with Roy and Glover? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that's Dave at the time. He lived in Dinkytown. He was on. I get his family was on University, maybe, but anyway, he lived within blocks of where the Scholar was. So he was part of that scene too before I knew him. But I got to meet him then, and we became compadres in a way. And then there was a point at which Dave went out to New York City. I think he was trying to see how he would do out there. He worked in the garment district for a while. And there was during that period of time, I also was in my hometown, which is Rochester, New York, for a while. And I went to New York to, hook up with Dave. And Tony was there. I had not met him before that. And we played together for, just trying to feel it out in Dave's apartment. And it became clear that we had common ground. And that was the beginning of us getting together professionally.
When you would play in Dinkytown, would it be accurate to say that you became superstars within the neighborhood?
Became what?
Stars or superstars?
I don't think we had any superstars. We were just, like I say, we're just part of the scene, and there were other people playing who were interesting as well. There's a guy named Hugh Brown who played, and he did pretty good. A guy named Jeff Espina, who was also a good player. Jerry Gooch was another guy. These are all people who could play, and I don't know if we were considered to be a notch above anybody or not, but we got to be known for sure.
You were a musician, obviously. Did you ever consider yourself a beatnik?
Well, the beatnik, yeah. Let's see. I think it was when I got out of the service. I went up to San Francisco. I knew some people up there, and I had a guitar, and I wound up playing daily in this coffee house. It was called the Fox and the Hounds, and it's right in the middle of the North Beach. Another person who was playing in that same place was Hoyt Axton, who I think was in the Navy at the time. And anyway, I was kind of stuck there for 3 months. The guy who had the coffee house, he he gave me a really good big hamburger, one a day, and $1. And then he had a storage room with a mattress in it where I slept. And that was my situation. Now for that $1, you could go down. I could go down to the Mazzoni wine distributors with my own jug, and you could get two quarts for 50 cents of red wine. Then cigarettes I was smoking at the time was 35 a pack. And I had 15 cents to go down to the grocery store and buy some bananas. And that's the way I lived for 3 months.
Let me pause for just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, we are rolling again.
My time there, of course, it was kind of the end of the beatnik, and right around the corner was coming the hippies.
There's a lot of comparisons made between Greenwich Village, North Beach, Berkeley, and Dinkytown.
Right.
How similar was Dinkytown to those other hotbeds of intellectualism, art, music?
Yeah, well, like I say, that's the East Coast and the West Coast, and we were kind of proud of saying we're not East Coast or West Coast, and we got our own, you know. And it was, you know, those places are places which were big deal places before all this stuff happened, and you know, Dinkytown wasn't. Dinkytown was a funky little place at that time. Yeah, unlike the way it is now. But you know, it was smaller, but not dumber. You know.
In the 60s, you had obviously civil rights issues, Vietnam. Were you drawn to politics?
Not really. I was surrounded by it, of course, and also surrounded by a lot of people who were involved with it. But I never became actually politically involved. I have a vague memory at some point playing at a benefit for McGovern out east. That's as close as I came.
With one exception.
With one exception, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I used to drink down here with a guy named Michael Barrows. He was running for mayor, independent Republican, and this was, you know, this was the hippie area down here in West Bank, and a lot of stuff was going. It was a very, very interesting time, and probably the most enjoyable. But in any case, I decided I was going to make a run for mayor, and I printed up little things you could pin on you with my name, running for mayor. I went on KFAI, and I don't know what I said, and I don't know what my platform was. But it was all in fun, of course. And so then we had the election, and Michael had not won. And but he brought me down the printout of all the write-in votes. Big long piece of paper. I'd gotten 3 votes. I was 1 ahead of Hubert Humphrey, who was dead at the time, and 1 behind Mickey Mouse. And I thought, boy, if that ain't perfect political position, I don't know what is.
Let's talk about one of the characters in your memories of him, Melvin Makash.
Right. Makash had a bookstore. It was the kind of bookstore that's with ancient, obscure kind of things in it. He was a long-bearded character, feisty. I think he also, where he lived too, there used to be gatherings. People come over, and intellectuals and whatever. But he was a valuable part of Dinkytown at the time, you know. And anyway, towards the end of it all, of his time there, he had his bookshop was I think it was on 4th Street, but Anyway, it was right next to a Bridgman's, and Bridgman's had decided that they wanted his space, and of course there was an uproar about that among the Dinkytown people, and we did a sit-in at Bridgman's as a protest. That was getting to be the way to protest in the early days. And what we did is a whole bunch of us went in there and occupied a seat, drank coffee, sat there for hours so that they couldn't get other customers in there. And eventually they wanted to get a little tough with it, you know, and I don't know what they thought they were going to do, but they had these two guys there who were obviously not part of us, not even part of Dinkytown. I call them goons, you know. They had hefty-looking guys with suits on, and I don't know what their real function was supposed to be. But in any case, one day we had a thing where we were all there. We had a portable radio, and the deal was there was a payphone on the wall. One of us was going to go and talk on the payphone to a radio station. Which one, I'm not remembering. We talked to the radio station about what was going on there, and of course it was coming over our radio. And we were all having a lot of fun with that, you know, laughing about it. And these two guys, they didn't know what was going on. They knew something was going on, but they couldn't figure it out until finally they did. And one of the guys went in the kitchen, got a big knife, cut the receiver off of the phone to stop that, you know. Well, it was all, you know, it was all futile, of course, and eventually Bridgman's took over Makash's store.
I want to come back to that in a little bit, just because there was some background noise, so I'll ask about it again, but I want to move forward as well. The racial element. I've heard from others that we've talked to that late 50s, early 60s, that Dinkytown from a racial standpoint was becoming quite diverse, and it was different than other parts of Minneapolis and Minnesota for sure. What are your memories of the racial situation, how people coexisted, things along those lines?
To tell you the truth, I remember it as being mostly white. I mean, it wasn't all white, of course, but it's not something I remember as being a racial situation, to tell you the truth.
Let's go back. I'm going to ask you a couple questions almost identical about Bob Dylan, just so we have different audio.
Yeah.
Describe, from your interaction with him and observations of him, what type of character he was.
Somewhat enigmatic. You know, he was Zimmerman and he was Dylan, and you know, he was a little on the mysterious side. People didn't know what to think of him. Some people didn't like him. He had an attitude of sorts. I got along with him real good, you know, and there were stories about him and little events, you know, and of course some of the women were charmed by him. How could that not be? And like that, you know.
What was he like to play with when you'd sit around playing guitar?
Yeah, well, he and I both were kind of in a folk realm as far as playing the guitar went, which is fairly, you know, it's fairly simple. It's not very complicated stuff. I think when after he got famous, he got more involved with his playing, different kinds of playing, piano and electric guitar and all that. But it was pretty much a folk kind of thing, and very, very easy for us to follow along with each other.
For you, when and how did the Spider nickname come about?
Okay. There was a time when I was in Rochester, New York. I I worked in an automotive parts place. I was the paint mixer. I worked there for a year and a half. Anyway, the next step up from a paint mixer was to work out in the shelves, finding parts. You know, you get an order and and these shelves were quite high, and I used to climb around in those shelves, and one of those guys called me Spider, right? Which I more or less forgot about. But when Dave and Tony and I were getting together, we were trying to be like the old blues guys who were all, you know, Blind Lemon or Lightning, you know, or they had all some kind of moniker. And so we had to have our own. And Dave was called Snaker because he had a sinuous way of dancing. Tony was Little Sun, that's S-U-N, because of his dark demeanor. And I thought, what the hell, I'll be Spider. And it seemed to fit me anyway, because I'm a tall, skinny guy.
Let's go back, again, feel free to repeat yourself in any way, but tell me about the sit-in at Bridgman's to support Makash.
Yeah. You want the whole story?
Yeah,
Okay.
a little quieter now.
Yeah. Makash's, he had his bookstore, a charming place. Some of his stuff was maybe hard to find or obscure. He was a definite strong element in the Dinkytown area. He was a character that you couldn't ignore. And anyway, his store, his bookshop was right next to a Bridgman's on the corner, and Bridgman's had decided that they needed that space to expand out, which was not what we wanted. And it was going to be a real shame if it actually happened, which of course it did. But in any case, in order to get in their way, we did sit-ins. We'd go get there early in the day and fill all the seats and drink a cup of coffee for hours to stifle the normal clientele. And at one point, I don't know why or what they thought they were going to accomplish, but they got a couple of guys that I call goons. They were kind of hefty guys with suits on, and they were there when we were doing our thing, and I don't know what they were supposed to do. But in any case, there was one day where we had a little thing that we were doing, which was we had brought a portable radio, and we made a deal with one of the radio stations. I don't remember which one it was. And we called them on the phone. They had a coin phone on the wall. So we called up the radio station, and then of course we were listening to ourselves doing that. And it was all very funny to us. And these two guys with the suits on didn't know what was going on. They knew something was going on, but they were looking around, they couldn't figure it out until they did figure it out about the phone. And one of these guys went in the kitchen and got a butcher's knife and came out and cut the phone receiver off. And it was all very exciting in a minor sort of way. And of course, eventually Bridgman's won out.
Even though you weren't involved with the protest over the Red Barn, you're aware of it, were there at the time.
Yeah.
What is it about, at the time, what was it about the people in Dinkytown that led them to be so active and supportive of these local businesses?
Yeah, well, Dinkytown was its own special place, and it was ours, and it was funky. You know, there was a place called the Dirty Grocery there, where we call it the Dirty Grocery, and you could buy 6 packs of beer, and then there was above that there were some apartments with little balcony out of the back, and we'd go up there and drink beer and play the guitars, and it was our place, and it had a certain quality. And then when the corporate started coming in and changing it, well, we didn't like it. We didn't want it to be that way. And of course, so-called progress is relentless, and now it's nothing like it used to be.
Pause for a second. Here we are rolling.
What do you think led to the shift from Dinkytown to the West Bank?
Well, the West Bank, of course, Dinkytown at that time, there was no bars there. And this, I mean, it's just across the river, so it's convenient that way for people who had lived over there to come and live over here. And it was, back then, this was called Snooze Boulevard. There was a lot of working class people, a lot of Scandinavians, of course, and there was, geez, I don't know how many bars there were. There was lots of them, all the way from Seven Corners to where the Caboose is now. And it was kind of a natural shift, but it also was it was different in it wasn't like it wasn't quiet like was over there in a sense. So you could have, there was a lot of music and bars, and some of it was country and western music, and there were people would go out and fight with each other in the street sometimes and all that. But it was good, and it was very it was also very what do they call it, diversified.
Yeah.
There were some good black bars up around the corner on Washington. There was a place that had really class acts, black bands, big name bands playing, and it was a little more to it, and especially it added the drinking element in a heavy way.
What about Dinkytown am I forgetting to ask about that you want to add?
Oh.
Yeah, is there anything we've left out?
Well, I wish I don't know what the fuck happened to this piece of paper. The Scholar, I think when I first came here, was run by a guy named Bob Fishman. You don't know that name, do you?
Mm-mm.
And then there was a guy named Clark Batho who had it. A number of different owners, and Red Nelson was one of the people who also had it, the Scholar. And Red Nelson over there and later on over here was a major force. He was kind of a wild guy, drove a motorcycle, had after-hour parties consistently, and that's how I learned to get a little wild, or maybe sometimes more than a little. But another guy over there was a poet who taught at the university, and then McAllister, and then went out east to teach. A guy named Jim Wright, who was a pretty well-known poet. On this, if I can find this paper, that's not it under here, is it?
I don't think so.
If I can find this paper, there's some other names that may be of interest to you.
Okay. Anything you want to ask?
Let me just shut down for. Oh.
Okay, let's get that. Yeah.
Hang on. Record video. Did it? Okay.
So tell us about the relationship between Maury Bernstein and Bob Dylan.
Well, I don't think I ever got to the relationship point, but Maury was a character of his own, and he was a pure folky guy, And when he started deviating, and of course Dylan was a little arrogant and you know, had his own way with the folk and what he did. And Maury, he couldn't abide Dylan. He really disliked him. He didn't do anything about it, of course, but
What made Maury such a unique individual?
he was not a very, he was kind of a shortish guy, kind of heavy built, but he was he was sort of reclusive guy. But on the other hand, he was always coming into the Scholar, and it's hard to tell what to say about him. Other people could maybe do better than I, but he was definitely part of the scene. I mean, if anybody was there, if you mentioned his name, oh yeah, I remember Maury.
What was his business, or what did he do for employment?
I don't know if he ever had any. I'm not aware of any employment that he had, but he was all around. He wound up over here on the West Bank too for a period of time. But all I can say, he was a character, somewhat of an intellectual, you know.
Did you know Billy Golfus and Judy Hansen?
Billy, of course, I knew. Judy, I'm not placing right off.
Oh, she was a folkie who teamed up with, I forget, but they were on Harrison Keeler's show all the time.
Yeah.
And she claimed to have started at the Scholar as well.
Is it what now?
She started at the Scholar as well.
Judy. Yeah. I just saw her last Friday. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was a bunch of them. Judy was one of them. Jerry Rao. You know Jerry Rao? No.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I think it's
Diamond Dave?
Huh?
Okay, we
Yeah.
are rolling.
That's it. Diamond
Yeah.
Dave.
Okay. Go ahead.
How'd you know about him?
Oh, just talking to people, research.
Yeah.
I've
Okay.
actually interviewed him for the project, somewhere along the line.
So go ahead. Yeah, let's talk about
This-
Dave.
Well, I don't know what to say about him. I just got these names of these people, and I know they were there. And as far as any incidents, I'll just give you their names. But
Okay.
let me do this other thing though.
Yeah.
You can. Why don't you ask me about how I got into the music business?
All right.
All right, we are rolling.
How'd you get involved in the music business?
Okay, I came from Rochester, New York. I came here to go to the university. I was an engineering student. I lived in Pioneer Hall, the dormitory over there. And after I'd been a good student for about a year and a half, this guy invited me up to his room to listen to folk music. And he had some recordings. I think Josh White was one of them. The Weavers, and a Minnesota woman named Cynthia Gooding. And he also had a guitar he could play himself. And he loaned me his guitar and a Burl Ives songbook for a while. And it's not that hard, you know. In about 2 weeks, I could actually play some songs. And that was the kind of the beginning of it. The time when I was in the service, and everybody was supposed to go out and do the clean this and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes my guitar was there for some reason, and they holler, "Private Koerner up to the duty office," and they'd say, "Play some tunes for us," you know. So that was kind of the beginning of that all. But when I came back and was in Dinkytown, got into Dinkytown, this guy, his name was Harry Weber, and he was part of the scene in the Scholar as well. And he knew Dylan quite well, and Dave Ray. He was very influential to a bunch of people in his own way. And there was a period of time where Dave and I both lived in a house with him over in southeast Minneapolis, next to the railroad tracks. And I think it was on it was on New Year's Eve. Me and Dave decided we were going to get on a freight train. And we hung around and hung around. It was colder than shit, you know. I mean, and finally, you know, we talked to some of the guys on the, you know, train workers, and finally we got on a boxcar headed towards Hudson, Wisconsin. And it turned out there's some packing material there, which was lucky. We started a fire and to warm ourselves, got to Hudson, got off, called somebody to come and pick us up and bring us back home. But anyway, Harry was a very he got me started, and he was a very powerful personality in a way, and was connected, like I say, with both Dylan and Dave and a lot of other people too. But